I got a spicy one for you guys. What's up everybody? Brandon Wersch here, and welcome to another episode of Wednesdays with Wersch, where I'm bringing you the latest and greatest information when it comes to health and wellness. Today's video is gonna be about the ever so popular ketogenic diet. Yes, the fat diet. We're gonna be breaking down what the diet is, its origin story, benefits, trade-offs, my personal experience with the diet, since I was on it for about 6 months. And then we're gonna be talking about possible applications, whether or not it's right for you. So let's dive into it. But first, I wanna give a shout out to last week's comment of the week, coming to us from Gina. Thank you, Gina. How did you develop your morning routine? Also, can you post a link to your morning coffee recipe? Absolutely. So I have the morning coffee recipe in the description below if you guys wanna check that out. And in regards to my morning routine, I actually snagged that from Tim Ferriss. One of the things that he did on his podcast is he compiled all of his notes from over 200 interviews, and what he saw is like a common denominator between all these successful people was a consistent morning routine practice. So I decided to take the best practices from some of those people and adopt that into my own morning routine, which I do every single day, and it just helps me prime my day to try and have the best possible start as I can. All right, so thank you, Gina. So what is the ketogenic diet, also known as the keto diet? Well, a ketogenic diet, according to Google, is a diet that tends to promote the metabolic formation of ketone bodies by causing the body to use fat rather than carbohydrates as its principal energy source. So what does that mean? Well, it essentially means that you're converting from burning carbohydrates into glucose and using that as your primary fuel source to burning fats and converting that into ketones as your primary fuel source. So what does that look like in the body? Well, when you ingest carbohydrates, it's getting broken down by the liver and turned into glucose, which is then fueling your brain and fueling your muscles. When you ingest fats, your stomach is metabolizing this, pushing it to the liver, but it's converting it to ketones. Now, many people think like, well, if I eat fats, won't that make me fat? No, that's actually a common myth that's been totally debunked. Fats do not make you fat. When you eat in excess or you eat the wrong types of foods, yes, they will make you fat. But when we're talking about saturated fats, monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, you're typically good when those are coming from good sources, whether it's like meat, dairy, or nuts. So we'll go over that. Let's say we have a car, right? And the car is burning gasoline, and then you have a hybrid which is burning electricity and gasoline. You're essentially moving your fuel source over to electricity while you're still burning some carbs, but you're mostly running on this new fuel source. And that's why this is such a tricky thing, is because the ketogenic diet is unlike any other diet out there, where you're having to go through some serious metabolic changes in order for this to take place, or you to start becoming more metabolically flexible. Now, I'll get into that in a little bit. But let's talk about the origin of this diet. So the origin story of the ketogenic diet actually stemmed from a doctor that was doing research with epilepsy patients in 1921. And his name was Dr. Russell, Wilder? Yeah, Russell Wilder. And this guy was using the ketogenic diet in a setting where people were having seizures. And he was helping to assist them in reducing the frequency and intensity of those seizures. Now, fast forward into the 1990s when the Atkins diet started to become a big thing, and you're seeing people eating nothing but bacon and all these other crazy things that they were doing, and margarine was on the rise, and everybody was like, oh, I can eat whatever I want. Yeah, well, now it's become this like new fad diet where people are using it as some sort of excuse to eat a bunch of different fats. So you're like, well, I don't understand how that's different than the Atkins diet. Well, the way the ketogenic diet is structured, a strict ketogenic diet, is 70% of your calories are coming in as fats. Then you have 20% are coming in from protein, and about 10% are coming in as carbohydrates. So what does that look like? Roughly less than 30 grams of carbohydrates a day. Yeah, I know. It's very little. Like that's like half a bag of potato chips. So when you're jumping over to this, the reason why it's so difficult and the reason why so many people have a hard time adhering to this diet is because it's extremely strict. And that's one of the downsides that I'll get to later. But first, I'd like to address some of the benefits, what you can expect if you were to move over to a ketogenic diet, or maybe why you would use a ketogenic diet. So let's dive into the benefits. Benefit number 1, improved inflammatory markers. Now, one of the biggest problems that we're seeing right now in today's society is inflammation from food. Now, what inflammation can cause in the body is leaky gut, which a lot of us have heard, as well as a lot of pain in joints, and inflammation just in the body in general just doesn't sound good. So one of the ways that you can combat inflammation is by eating healthy fats, which is part of the reason why a ketogenic diet will help with inflammation, is because you're eating a lot of healthy fats, fatty proteins, fatty fish, nuts, things like that. So that's one of the benefits. Benefit number 2, improve mobilization of both brown and white fat in visceral and adipose tissue. Now, what does that mean? Well, you have fat that's stored in the adipose tissue, which would be like your arm, right? Like the backside of your arm. Or you have visceral fat, which is in your stomach, like around your organs, your abdominal region. Now, what happens is your body, when it receives excess calories or excess carbohydrates, is it stores it as fat for fuel for later. Now, what we're not very good at in today's world is actually mobilizing or oxidizing that fat. Now, when you're on a ketogenic diet, your primary fuel source is fat. Now, when you eat too much of those fats, it's gonna store as fat. But the way to think about this is like pouring water into a cup, right? So you have like a cup here, you're pouring water into that cup, that's your fat. You're eating fat, it's filling up the cup, it's filling up the cup. But as you're filling it up, you're also consuming the water that's in the cup. You're consuming the calories from fat. Your body's storing it as fat and burning it as fat all at the same time. Now, when you're eating a carbohydrate diet, when you eat too many carbohydrates, what it's doing is it's storing whatever the spill off is into fat storage or visceral fat. So when you eat a ketogenic diet, you're gonna find that your ability to mobilize fats are gonna improve. So you're gonna be able to use your own body, the fat that's on your body, as energy, which is great because for most of us, we can't do that. Now for me, when I was on a ketogenic diet, I lost like 20 pounds within the first 3 months of getting on that diet. I was 220 and I dropped all the way down to like, I think 195 at my lowest. So I was even shredding fat pretty quick. So if you guys are looking for a fat burner, the ketogenic diet is an absolute machine at mobilizing fat, but not just like the easy to access fat. It's also good at breaking down that crappy visceral fat that we store around our guts. That's why you see people with the love handles and the beer bellies and things like that. That's where it comes from. Benefit number 3, improve cognition and mental clarity. Now this one is a tough one to kind of like pin down, but from my own experiences on a ketogenic diet, I noticed that when I was in between meals or even completely fasted, like I hadn't eaten breakfast or anything like that, my energy levels were really, they were stable throughout the day. I didn't have these huge peaks and crashes and things like that. And because I wasn't thinking about food or craving food, my cravings for sugar also went down too, which is crazy. But all these different spikes in energy that I would normally have when I'd have a big meal, I wasn't having it with this. And it allowed my clarity of mind, especially in the mornings, to be like crystal clear. Like I didn't have any brain fog, there was no lag time at accessing memories, there was none of that stuff. So improved memory, cognition, clarity, whatever you want to call it, that's gonna be the next benefit. Benefit number 4, reversal of type 2 diabetes. Yeah, you heard it. So diabetes is one of those tricky things where there's a lot of markers that are involved. Your genetics, your environment, your nutrition, all those things play a factor in this. Now, what we're seeing is when you merge over to a ketogenic diet, by mobilizing your fuel source from carbohydrates to fat, you're not having those big spikes in blood sugar. So your body doesn't have to produce as much insulin in order to counteract that blood sugar, like I was talking about before. That's a big problem for diabetics, is they can't regulate their blood sugar because their pancreas is now not functioning properly. So, same with their kidneys too. Same thing, different story. But anyways, so what you're seeing with a ketogenic diet is that you can actually start to work your way backwards to a healthy life through a ketogenic diet. So reversal of type 2 diabetes. And if you want to look up the research, I can pin it in the description below. Just shoot me a comment. I'd be happy to send that to you guys. This leads us into benefit number 5, increase in apoptosis. Apop what? I don't like Pop-Tarts. Maybe you do love Pop-Tarts. No, I'm not talking about Pop-Tarts. I'm talking about apoptosis. This is programmed cell death. And one of the great things about being on a ketogenic diet is that when you go into a state of ketosis, your body is now not so much focused on dealing with all this inflammation and all this bullshit from your standard American diet. It's actually able to spend time going and repairing tissue, going in and producing new cells and cleaving out old cells, also known as senescent or partially dead cells. Now what happens in our body is over time these cells are supposed to die. There's a programmed length of time that they're supposed to live in our body. Apoptosis is the process of killing off those cells or removing those dead cells so they don't then become cancer later on. Now what we're seeing with a ketogenic diet, or people that are able to obtain a state of ketosis, whether it's fasting or on a keto diet, is that they have higher levels of apoptosis. They're actually cleaving out these precancerous or dead cells to make new room for these healthy young cells to come out, which will then give you more energy, more vibrance, more vitality, which is why the ketogenic diet is now tied to longevity. Now, there isn't a lot of research to support that, but there are some people like Dom D'Agostino, as well as other doctors like Dr. Rhonda Patrick that are researching longevity, and they're looking at, as well as Walter Longo too, that are looking at telomere length and healthy lifespan as well as full lifespan and the ketogenic diet. So there's going to be some great new research that comes out with that as well. I can't say it with certainty just yet. Now, the final last benefit of a ketogenic diet is the improved metabolic flexibility. So being able to toggle between carbohydrates and fats. That's a huge thing in today's society that we're really lacking, is being able to access our fat storage and use it as fuel when necessary. So I hope you guys found those benefits helpful. Now we're gonna move into the trade-offs, some of the downsides of a ketogenic diet. Although keto is great, I love it. Used to be the keto kid. I'm not Brandon Shaw, but I loved keto and I was a big fan of it. But I started to find it impeding on my social life. And that's really the hardest thing about this diet, is you have to be so strict so that you don't fall out of ketosis. I mean, just one meal where you have too much carbohydrates can knock you out of ketosis. So you have to be extremely particular about what you eat, and that goes for even going out and eating with friends. So if you're gonna go out and eat a meal, your best shot at being successful is having maybe a piece of salmon with some steamed vegetables. But maybe you wanna go to the bar and watch the game. Well, drinking beer, that's gonna knock you out of ketosis. Maybe you're going to some sort of party and they're serving a particular kind of food because you're not cooking, they're cooking up a big meal, and you don't wanna be rude, but maybe their meal isn't keto friendly. So I started finding myself getting invited to less and less events, and not really being as social as I would like to be. So I became more of a recluse, more of a hermit. I'm not saying you have to be this way on a ketogenic diet. I'm just merely pointing out some of the trade-offs that I noticed when I was on there, which was a decrease in my social life, real tight restrictions on what I could and couldn't eat, which made adherence really tough because I found myself just out of being a rebel wanting to eat a frickin' cookie. I was just like, I just want to fucking eat a cookie. But that's just me being a psychopath when it comes to that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's one of the trade-offs. The other thing is cooking. So a lot of times people don't know how to cook certain types of foods or healthy foods. So one of the biggest things that I can give you in terms of advice would be using oils like coconut oil, avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, but things like vegetable oil and things like that can actually introduce unhealthy fats into your diet. So that's canola oil, vegetable oil, rapeseed oil, flaxseed oil. A lot of those are heavily processed and can actually cause inflammation in the body. So if you're not careful on this diet about the types of fats you're bringing in, especially if you're consuming a lot of dairy fat, you might notice some issues with irritable bowel syndrome, where you're having to basically have diarrhea all the time. That is a downside of it as well. I'm not saying that this happened to me, but there was other cases where people were consuming too much dairy product, and that was a byproduct of that. So those are just some of the trade-offs. So just be careful when you're getting in this diet. Make sure you're getting a good source, healthy source of fat, coming from fatty pieces of meat, fatty pieces of fish, healthy fats from avocados, nuts, eggs, egg yolks, all that good stuff. So be careful out there. All right, so who is the ketogenic diet good for? Well, I would say just about anybody. Like I told you in the beginning of this video, my philosophy when it comes to health and wellness is what works for you now may not work for you a couple years from now. And what works for me might not work for you as well. And you have to experiment. You have to play around with your body and find out what works best. For me, what I took away from the ketogenic diet was really now consuming a high-fat diet. I'm no longer keto adapted. I'm not in a state of ketosis, nor am I testing myself with the pee strips and things like that. But I've definitely taken in some of those things. I'm eating a lot more healthy fats in my diet. I've slowly introduced carbohydrates back in, and I'm noticing better performance in the gym, which is important to me. I'm not as concerned about body fat. I kind of stay around 8% body fat for the most part now. And it's just been a great tool for me. Now, for you guys trying it at home, if you guys are interested in trying this diet out, I've included an entire Keto Bible down below where you can look at the different types of foods, what to stay away from, what your grocery list should look like. Rule.me put together the best comprehensive guide I've ever seen when it comes to a ketogenic diet. Now, I'm not sponsored by them. It's just a resource that I found very helpful when I was on this diet. So definitely go check it out. I've linked it in the description below. If you're a type 2 diabetic, I highly recommend that you check out this diet. If you know anybody in your family that's dealing with epilepsy, I would definitely get on the keto diet. If you're even a bodybuilder or somebody that's interested in physique competitions, this could be a great alternative from doing the yo-yoing of carbohydrates and toggling back and forth once you start getting below 5% body fat. So that would be a great option for you guys as well. All right, that's gonna wrap it up for today's video. Thank you for joining me. I hope you guys appreciated the content and liked the ketogenic diet. Go ahead and comment down in the section below if you guys have any questions on it or would like to learn a little bit more. Also, if you guys have any questions for next week's video, please feel free to put it down below. It doesn't have to be ketogenic related. But all right, I'm gonna wrap things up with the quote of the week, which is, "Faith is to believe what you do not yet see. The reward for this faith is to see what you believe." And this is coming from St. Augustine. Love that quote. All right, guys, that's it. I love you. I'll see you in the next one. Like, share, subscribe, and don't be afraid to comment in the sections down below. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.